Dart School presents decimal fractions, common fractions, and percentages. Any number can be written in three different forms: as a fraction, as a decimal, and also as a percentage. For example, the fraction 1/2 is equal to the decimal 0.5 or 0.50. You could put as many number of zeros to the end of a decimal number. That doesn't change the number. And that's equal to 50%. They are all different forms of the same number. In this video, we are going to learn about how to convert from one form to the other. To change a fraction to its equivalent decimal, you just got to divide the numerator with the denominator. Take for example 1/2. The fraction 1/2 is nothing but the division of the number 1 with 2, or 1 divided with 2, like this. Note that any integer number can be written in a decimal form by putting a decimal point in the end of the number, followed up by zeros after the decimal point. So 1 can be written as 1.0, and because 2 cannot divide 1, you want to divide 2 with 10. Put a decimal point over here, and then because 2 times 5 is 10, write down a 5. You have a 10. 2 times 5, subtract, there's no remainder, and there you go. 1 divided by 2 is 0.5 or 0.5, which is what we have over here. Similarly, the fraction 3/5 is the same as dividing 3 with 5. As 5 cannot divide 3, you put a dot, change the 3 to its decimal form, 3.0. Ignore the decimal point. Imagine dividing 30 with 5. The answer is 6. Put the decimal point over here, 0.6. 5 times 6 is 30. There's no remainder. So we say 3/5 is equivalent to the decimal form 0.6. So if you were to change 3/5, the fraction, to its decimal, the answer is 0.6. How about the fraction 2/3? What is the decimal equivalent of 2/3? Let's do the same thing. Let's divide 2 with 3 this time. 3 cannot divide 2. Put a decimal point, put a 0, as if you are dividing 20 with 3. 3 times 6 is 18. Don't forget the decimal point. 18. Subtract. This time we do have a remainder, 2. And then just keep doing the same thing. Divide 2 with 3. You can do that. So change this 2.0 to 2.00. Remember, you can add as many number of zeros as you want to the end of a decimal number. It's still the same number. 2 is the same as 2.0, that's the same as 2.00, that's the same as 2.000, and so on. So get down this 0 now. This changes to a 20. So we have a 6 over here, 18, and the same thing keeps repeating. So we say that 2/3 is equivalent to 0.6666. It goes on and on forever and ever. It's a recurring decimal. And more often than not, you would want to round it to 0.67. Okay, so that's changing from a fraction to a decimal. How do we go the other way? Given a decimal, how can we change it to its equivalent fraction? The first step is to rewrite the decimal as the number over 1. Well, any number can be written down as the number over 1 or divided with 1. Take for example this 0.5. 0.5 is equal to 0.5 divided by 1 or over 1. But this isn't a common fraction, because in a common fraction you have an integer numerator and an integer denominator. In this case, the numerator is not an integer, it's a decimal. So you want to change the numerator to an integer by multiplying that with a suitable power of 10. In this case, you just want to shift the decimal point one place over to the right, therefore you times it with 10. And then if you do that, you got to do the same with the denominator to be sure that the fraction doesn't change. So we have this is equal to 5 over 10. And then if you reduce or simplify this fraction, divide 5 with 5, 10 with 5, you have 1/2. So there you go, the fraction equivalent of 0.5 is 1/2. How about 0.6? 0.6 is equal to 0.6 over 1. That's not a common fraction. We need to multiply 0.6 with 10 to move the decimal point one place over to the right and change it to a 6. Times 10 times 10. This is equal to 6 over 10. Divide 6 with 2 and 10 with 2 to simplify it. So you have 3 on the top and 5 on the bottom. 0.6, the decimal, is equivalent to the fraction 3/5. What if you have something like, let's say, 0.45? In this case, the first step still remains the same. Rewrite it as 0.45 over 1. And then because the decimal point needs to be shifted 2 places over to the right to change it to an integer, you multiply the numerator and the denominator with 100 and not with 10. So this is going to be equal to 45 on the top, 100 on the bottom, and then divide 45 and 100 with 5. You have 9 on the top and 20 on the bottom. So the decimal 0.45 is equivalent to the fraction 9/20. Let's now talk about converting between decimals and percentages. To change a decimal number to a percentage, you multiply the number with 100, that is, move the decimal point 2 places over to the right. And to change a percentage to a decimal, you divide with 100. That means move the decimal point 2 places over to the left. So the decimal number 0.31 is equivalent to, multiply this with 100, meaning move the decimal point 2 places over to the right, 31%. Similarly, the decimal number, let's say 0.08, is equivalent to 8%, because if you move the decimal point 2 places over to the right, meaning multiplication with 100, you get 8. How about 0.3? To move this 2 places over to the right, the decimal point, you need to have a 0, and feel free to add as many number of zeros as you want. It doesn't matter at the end of a decimal point. So this is going to be 30%. And then changing a percentage, like I said, for example 63% to its decimal equivalent, is all about moving the decimal point 2 places over to the left, starting from the end, or where it is on the percentage. So this is going to be 0.63. Similarly, 31% is going to be equal to, move the decimal point 2 places over to the left, you get 0.31. How about 4%? Well, if you want to move the decimal point 2 places over to the left, you got to have a 0 at the beginning. 4 is the same as 0.4. So therefore this is going to be equal to, the decimal point comes and sits here, 2 places over to the left. So we have 0.04. Similarly, let's say 86.29% is going to be equal to 2 places over to the left, 0.8629. Let's now talk about changing a fraction to a percentage. Fraction to a percentage, and also the other way around, percentage to fraction. To To change a fraction to a percentage, multiply the fraction with 100 over 1 and simplify. And to change a percentage to a fraction, divide the percentage with 100, write it as over 100 and then simplify. Let's look at a few examples. Let's say you want to change the fraction 3/4 to its equivalent percentage. So all you need to do is multiply this with 100 over 1 and then simplify. Divide 4 with 4, 100 with 4. So you have 3 over 1 times 25 over 1. So that is equal to 3 times 25, which is 75%. Similarly, the fraction 1/5 is equal to 1/5 times 100 over 1 as a percentage. Divide 5 with 5, 100 with 5. You have 1 over 1 times 100 divided by 5 is 20 over 1. So this is 20%. That's the percentage equivalent of 1/5, this fraction. How about changing, let's say, 36% to its equivalent fraction? Like I said, rewrite the percentage as over 100. Percent means over 100. And then simplify. Divide the numerator and the denominator with their common factors, preferably the GCF, in this case 4. So this is going to be equal to 36 over 4 is 9 on the top, 100 over 4 is 25 on the bottom. So 9/25 is equivalent to 36%. Similarly, 15% is equal to 15 over 100. Divide the numerator and the denominator with 5. You get 3 on the top, 20 on the bottom. So 15% translates to the fraction 3/20. And that's how you change between fractions and percentages.